I'm going to ask you to take a moment here and just stop and think about all the narcissists that you know of who are in your life right now. Now, chances are we're not talking about people who are necessarily clinically evaluated as narcissists, but people who just have narcissistic tendencies to the point where, okay, this guy's a real pain. That type of narcissist. Now, if you were to ask 1,000 people to do that, to come up with a short list of maybe 2 or 3 people that they know who are almost certainly narcissists, you'd have a list of 2 or 3 thousand people who fit the criteria according to these individuals. Now, if you were to look at that list and read the names, and please don't send me names of people because that's not cool. But if that were to happen and you were to read the list, you know what? The names of the people who you asked to make the list typically don't show up on the list because we don't think of ourselves as narcissists. We think everyone else is, well, not everyone else, but we think narcissism is something that's for other people, not us. And chances are, because, 1% of the population actually is considered narcissistic. Now, don't quote me on that. I've heard it. I'm not citing a source. I'm just saying that's what I've heard. But let's stop and think for a second. Let's go through a checklist and let's ask ourselves a question. I mean, chances are you're not a narcissist or you wouldn't even be watching this video. But let's go through a checklist to find out. This is not a clinical checklist. This is not something that is a result of some study in a university somewhere. These are actually 8 things I made up on my own. I'm pushing 70 years old, and I've learned a thing or two over the decades, and one of the things I've learned is I've learned something about narcissism because I've had to put up with these people. So keep that in mind when we go through these questions. So ask yourself this, number 1. Are you perfect? Okay, everybody just said no. I could hear you. Are you perfect? But that's superficial, So a person who is not a narcissist is a person who understands that he or she is not perfect. Well, doesn't everybody say that? Yeah, everyone has this blanket statement that says, yeah, I know I'm not perfect. But when you ask them to be specific about their imperfections, that's where you start to find the narcissist. Because most of us can tell, okay, I've got this flaw. I can't swim, or maybe I'm tone deaf, or maybe I'm not very good at basketball. I mean, we could just make a whole list of things. I've never written a novel. Yeah, narcissists don't think of those things. All they can think of is that they're better than everyone else, they're preferred, and if they're going to admit that somehow they are flawed, it's a blanket statement. Oh yeah, I got my flaws. That's the way they phrase it. But they won't tell you specifically what they are. Now, we say flaws, probably a better term would be limits or limitations, so maybe we ought to use that term instead. So if we understand that we're not perfect, then chances are you're not a narcissist. Number 2 is your limitations. I'm not calling them flaws anymore. I'm calling them limitations. You know what your limitations are. We already mentioned that. Get out a pencil and paper or type this on your keypad, whatever. A list of things that you can't do. I can think of, just off the top of my head, I can think of probably 1,000,000. I can't run 60 miles an hour. I can't leap tall buildings at a single bound. I can't catch bullets with my teeth. I can't have a baby. It's like infinite number of things. Well, the point of that is, I know that sounds kind of silly, but the point of that is, if you know your limits, and it doesn't bother you to admit it or acknowledge it, then chances are you're not a narcissist, because a narcissist knows he has limits, or she has limits. In fact, he or she probably knows more so than anybody else, and she or he spends their entire lives trying to hide those limitations because they don't want anyone to know they have them, because they want to think of themselves and other people to think of themselves as superior. They're Superman, Superwoman in the world. But if you know what your limits are, You don't try to catch bullets with your teeth. You don't jump over tall buildings with a single bound. You're not Superman. A narcissist may not go to that extreme, but they won't admit it. Okay, maybe they'll admit that, but those extraordinary feats in life, they don't like to admit that they can't do those things. We know our limits, and if you know what your limits are, and you don't mind admitting it, chances are you're not a narcissist. Number 3 is we accept our limits. That is to say, if we are not narcissist, if you are not a narcissist, you accept your limits. So you made this list of, 100 things that you can't do. We all know that list could be infinite. We could just go on and on and on about all the things that we can't do and all the things that we can do. One of the things that would be on my list, if I were to list the things that I can do, is number 1 would be I can make a list. I can write. I can speak English. I can breathe. That goes on infinitely. So we accept our limits and we accept things that we are good at. We don't have, if you're not a narcissist, you don't have a serious problem with that. Maybe a little bit. But you know that you're not the best at everything, but you're not the worst at everything. That you have a lot of things that you can do. Literally, it's, maybe not literally, but almost literally, it's infinite. It just goes on and on. All the things that you can do. You don't need that boost of your ego constantly to keep building you up because you are never going to play professional football. But you've got talents in other areas. One weighs out the other. You're okay with that. A narcissist, not so much. But if you are okay with it, if you accept your limitations and the things that, as well as the things that you can do, chances are you're not a narcissist. Okay, number 4 is this. We are satisfied. We are satisfied with those limits. And a lot of people think, we were talking about playing professional basketball, and you got this guy and he's watching the Super Bowl and he's noticing, these guys are millionaires, some of them multimillionaires, and they're playing football. I could play football. I had to be a multi-millionaire. What makes these guys any better than me? That's narcissistic thinking. And they may not actually think those thoughts, but in some other area, they may think thoughts that are very similar. But a person who is not narcissistic, he's absolutely positively okay with not being a professional football player or whatever. He's perfectly okay. She's perfectly okay with not being the highest paid business person on the planet. He or she is perfectly okay not driving the nicest car in the neighborhood or living in the nicest house. They're okay with that. They get it. They understand they have limits. And they are satisfied with their limits. So here's what we got so far. Number 1, a person who is not a narcissist understands he or she is not perfect. Number 2, knows his or her limitations. Number 3, accepts those limitations. Number 4, is satisfied with those limits. Not just accept the limits, but is actually satisfied with what they got. Do you know what your IQ is? I have no idea, but I can tell you what it's not. My IQ is not 150. And if your IQ is under 50, you're smarter than I am. Guaranteed, no competition. I'm not going to do a test just so you can prove it. I concede. I admit defeat. Now, what about a person who has an IQ of 200? I'm not even sure that's possible, but let's say a person has an IQ of 200. Okay, relative to that person, the person with an IQ of 150 comes across kind of dumb, but compared relative to the person with 150, I come across as kind of dumb. Well, what we're talking about is this. We're perfectly okay with the fact that we may not be the smartest person in the world. Kind of touched on this a moment ago. We're not, we're just not terribly shaken over the fact that there may be some people out there like Einstein that had a little bit more on the ball intellectually than we do. That there may be some business professionals out there who have a gift, a talent for doing things that we just kind of miss, just not part of our neurological makeup. We're satisfied. We're okay with that. We're perfectly fine. We're kind of like the fish who is satisfied living in the water. You ever seen a fish try to climb a tree? You've heard that illustration before. That's not fair. That's just a fish having sense. You ever seen a monkey try to live in the water like a fish? You know what you call a monkey like that? They call that a dead monkey. You know, monkeys live in trees, fish live in water. One is not successful, the other a failure. They just in their place. They're doing what they're good at. And the fact that you may not have an IQ of 150 or you may not be a professional football player doesn't mean you are a flawed person. It just simply means you have limits relative to others and you are perfectly satisfied with those limitations because, quite frankly, if you're a fish, you don't want to be out climbing trees. You want to be where you are suited, where your environment suits you. Number 5 is this. You don't expect others to accept you all the time. And if you don't expect everybody to accept you all the time, chances are you're not a narcissist. I suppose there could be somebody with narcissistic traits who admit, okay, not everybody's going to love me and accept me, but they see those people as flawed. If people don't love and accept them and admire them and put them on a pedestal, then obviously they're missing something. But if you get that, if you understand it, that if you don't expect others to accept you all the time, whatever. Life goes on, they don't like you, cool. Go somewhere else. I'll go my way, you go your way, no problem. Because we realize that others have their flaws. What's wrong with that? Nothing. A narcissist sees everybody's having flaws, except, of course, for him or herself. Number 6 is if you're not the type of person that fakes it, chances are you're not a narcissist, because one thing that narcissists love to do is they love to fake it. They love to pretend to be somebody that they are not because they're not happy with themselves. Now, everybody does this to some degree, and that's actually a good thing, but not to the extent of hubris, not to the extent of being a narcissistic personality. I like to watch sometimes these old movie reels that were taken back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, where somebody would set a movie camera on a public street, or maybe in the back of a vehicle, or maybe on top of a building, and they just let it run. They just film life as it was then. So if you're watching, say, a street scene from maybe Hollywood, or maybe San Francisco, or maybe Los Angeles in the 1940s, you notice something about those people. They dress nice. I mean, unless they're on the job working, they dress nice. I mean, all of them. The men wear suits and ties and hats. The women wear hats that are all usually, not always, depends on the year, the style at the moment, but typically they're kind of flowery. Sometimes, you got in the 50s they came up with that pillbox, whatever that was. But they try to dress nice. I mean, women would wear dresses that are mid-calf, and they looked absolutely positively beautiful. And these guys, and they were back in the 40s and 30s and 50s, you didn't see too many guys like me who have too many pounds on them. These guys were in shape. They didn't even try to be. That's the way life was. But the point is, they're dressed up. They look nice. They look good. Are they masking? Are they hiding something? Are they narcissists? Was everybody back then a narcissist trying to fool everybody else? No, they were just being courteous. They were being polite to other people. They combed their hair, wore a hat, whatever, so that they would present well to other people to make other people comfortable, not to make other people jealous or envious of them. So you can dress nice for one or two reasons, and you can't tell the difference just by looking. You can dress up really, really nice in your Sunday best. Look, I don't think people do that anymore, but back in the day, people would dress up really nice, and you'd have two identical twins dressed in the exact same clothes. Could be two men, two women. Exactly the same. I mean, everything about them the same. But one of the twins was dressing nice to compliment other people, so other people didn't have to look at him disheveled, where the twin was doing it to take advantage of other people. See the difference? So one is a narcissist and one is not, but you can't tell the difference. All right. But the point is that if you're not faking it, if you comb your hair in the morning, if you shave, get set up, and, just look halfway decent, that doesn't mean you're trying to fake it. It just means you're being respectful. And if you're doing it for the purpose of being respectful, chances are you are not a narcissist. Number 7 is, if you think you count, then you are not a narcissist. That's my opinion. Now, when I say you understand that you count, what I mean is this. You got a place. You've got to function in the machinery of life. You're one of the, what do they call those things? Cogs, wheels, whatever, maybe a belt in the machinery. You're a part in the machinery, and the machinery, maybe it could work without you, but it wouldn't work quite as well. Oh, that sounds a little narcissist, doesn't it? Narcissistic? No. The difference is the narcissist thinks he is the machine. The narcissist thinks that he's the cog, or he's the wheel, or he's the belt, without which the machine just absolutely positively cannot work. And quite frankly, there is no other cog, wheel, or belt that could replace him or her. He's got to be the one. See the difference? So, if you think that you count in the sense that you're a part of the machinery, that you have a place in life and you're grateful for it, but you don't think you're all that, you don't think the world is going to end when you leave. Yeah, I know some narcissists who actually think that, not literally. But the way they punish people is they leave them alone. Punish you, I'm not going to talk to you for a while. Please, would you do that? You know, punish me some more. I like that. But, yeah, if you understand that you count, among others, you're one of many that counts, chances are you're not a narcissist. Number 8, if you understand that your best friend, or we could phrase it this way, that friendship begins with the guy that you see in the mirror, chances are you are not a narcissist. Now, wait a minute. I'm thinking about the story of Narcissus. And the whole story was he was looking in water, and he saw his reflection, and he fell in love with himself. Kind of like looking in a mirror. He fell in love with himself. There was nobody out there quite like him. It wasn't that he befriended himself. He fell in love with himself, and then he fell in the water and he drowned, if I remember the story correctly. But when you look in the mirror, are you in love with yourself? Okay, you flex your muscles a little bit, you know, guys. I used to do that back when I had muscles. Flex them a little bit. I don't, you know, now it just hurts. But that person in the mirror, maybe not your best friend, but you have learned to accept him or her, and you have learned to befriend him or her, and you understand that before you can befriend other people, you've got to be satisfied and happy with the guy that you see in the mirror. Not so a narcissist. The narcissist looks in the mirror and says, okay, this is the greatest person on the planet. I mean, just look at me. I'm perfect in all of my ways. No, that's narcissism. But just be your own best friend is what I'm saying, so that you can befriend other people. And when you can do that, chances are you are not a narcissist. Okay, maybe there's some other things. I say maybe. I'm sure there's some other things that I didn't add to this list. And again, this is not clinical. Just some things that I made up as I was thinking through this. And if you have something to add, please do it in the comment section. But on the screen, you see 2 rectangle boxes. And if you want a conversation to keep on going, you know, guys, all you got to do is click on one of those 2 boxes and we keep on talking. Totally up to you. If you're done, well, thanks for stopping by and see y'all later.